Two. What's up, everybody? Welcome to another episode of the Conquer Athlete Podcast. I'm your host, Ryan Bucciantini, with my brother, Jay Leydon. We're here to drop some knowledge bombs on you guys today. But before we get into things, we got a pretty solid announcement that I think Jay and I are pretty stoked about. We have officially joined the Coach RX Podcast Network, which, if you haven't heard about, is a pretty awesome collection of different podcasts, all designed to kind of elevate the conversation around coaching, athlete development, athletes in general. So keep an eye out for that. That's definitely something you guys are going to want to check out. You can find the link to the full lineup of shows in our show notes once this airs. But I think this is going to be something really healthy for the coaching community, just kind of consolidation of some really solid podcasts.
Yeah, I'm excited for it. I think it's a great thing that they're doing over at Coach RX. OPEX is getting a bunch of different people from not just in the OPEX family, but associated with it, and is getting all the podcasts up there for like a collective. I think it's really cool.
Yeah, it'll be cool. It'll be cool to be a part of that. Hopefully some good conversation comes out of it, and old Fitzy just has he's got his thumb and everything. So it's cool to see that the next evolution of where they're headed.
Fitzy just gets it. Fitzy, I still talk to him from time to time, and like if I need something, like he's the fastest responder in the history of people.
That's saying something.
Like I know, like in his mind, he's retired from stuff, but I needed like a letter recommendation for college. I'm going to go back to my master's degree in exercise prescription. And he wrote me a letter recommendation in like 10 minutes from me sending the email. It was like thorough.
Maybe that's what retirement does.
Space you do.
Yeah. Realistically, I think that's what we're all striving for.
Retirement or be able to get shit done.
Dude, I'm ready to retire. I'm ready to throw it in. I'm ready to go sit on the beach somewhere or get lost in a mountain.
You could never retire. You just get lost in a mountain and then you'd set up fucking camping grounds and lead other people through mountains and you'd still do stuff.
Dude, maybe that's my calling, a campground host.
Didn't Cashew is Cashew still doing that? Not necessarily campground host, but getting like men together.
I think so.
And like destinations.
Yeah, I think so.
You could have like a Conquer men's retreat at a cabin in the woods, but you got to kill your food.
I mean, that'd be pretty dope. I could definitely.
I tell you what, I would not be there. Yeah.
No, you'd be the social experiment. The city boy comes to the mountain. I mean, that's what people want to see.
I'm so not a city boy either. Like I hate the city.
We'll call you a suburb.
A suburb.
A suburb dude.
Yeah. I'm a suburban boy.
Yeah, I like it. All right. Today I think it's super appropriate. Just based on everything we're seeing this year, definitely something we have all experienced as coaches, but I want to talk and kind of drive the conversation around micro peaking and working around athletes who are just either the athlete that, it's the end of the year, it's a competitive season, and they're looking to qualify for a bunch of different events, or the athlete who maybe is a little bit more strategic and throughout the year, they want to have some more micro peaks. Like they're looking at multiple different kind of competitive either touch points or benchmarks throughout the year, and what it's like peaking an athlete multiple times within the training year and how to just do that in a smart way and not burn them out.
That's a tough one. I think that's a hard concept to grasp onto with the sport of CrossFit, or for that matter, it involves different modalities because of that aspect of there being different modalities, right? So different biological responses to a person in the training throughout the time. Because you look at other events that have multiple peaks, track and field, gymnastics. I guess you could potentially say things like tennis too, right? And golf, where you have different competitions leading up to the main event. There's different components to that. But the stress and demand placed in the body, you can kind of plan for and with inside those, right? If it's gymnastics, depending on your event, you focus on that. If it's track and field, you focus on your race, your distance. But in mixed modal work or the sport of CrossFit, it makes it challenging due to every aspect of fitness that you have to sort of have rearing and ready to go to compete different times. Strength, power, endurance, recovery capability, mental resilience, dynamic contraction, fatigue, limitation, improvement with inside different energy system zones, being able to sprint, being explosive, being able to go long, gymnastic skill work, bodyweight skill work, lifting skill work. there's so many different parts to it, and being able to peak and coincide those energy systems and modality demands at different points can get pretty challenging. I think it becomes more challenging for that intermediate higher level athlete and even higher level athlete that's trying to make their name and is showing up at a bunch of different competitions where they're almost treating each one as a main event, almost like a fighter, right? Where you're treating each one like a main event to do well, to get your name out there, to get sponsorships, to get noticed, and to kind of have your hat thrown in the ring with everybody else. You look at MMA fighters, and for individuals that are on the come up, that's the landscape that they are involved in, where they get a fight, they go through an 8-week camp. Hopefully, their opponent doesn't bail out on them and makes weight, and they have it. They win, and then they're going to take the next one that's thrown at them for the most part because A, they need money, they need paycheck, and they got to keep stacking up the wins and getting their name out there to get picked up by the parent companies that own these smaller divisions, with eventually getting to whatever their goal is, right? Whether it's UFC, Bellator, Prime, whatever it might be, right? That can be super challenging. I've worked with a bunch of MMA fighters who were in just that field, that environment themselves of this, I'll call it, that amateur ranking. When I say amateur, I'm just referring to anybody not on a contract with like UFC, right? Or Bellator. And they're literally just like hoping for fights and taking fights and going through 8-week training camps, and they get there and their opponent bails. Right. And then they gotta scramble to get one maybe like in another 3 or 4 weeks or 6 weeks or another 8 weeks. Right. And think about the stress placed in your body, even if it is another 15 or 20 weeks after you go through this 8-week camp. Hopefully you have your weight cutting procedures strategically done and implemented correctly. So you're dropping weight accordingly and you're not at a drastic weight cut in a short amount of time, but you're cutting weight, you're energy deprived, you're exposing lots of energy through training, working on wrestling, cage wrestling, stand-up, Muay Thai, boxing, grappling, jiu-jitsu, you have all these different components that you're working on in the camp while potentially still doing some strength training. And then your body has that stressful environment. The stress itself of winning, putting pressure on yourself to win, leading into the event, going there, hopefully do compete and win, and your opponent doesn't bail, and then trying to recover from that, and then boom, you're right back in it again. And it can be a big toll on the body, physically and mentally, right, and emotionally. And we do see that in the sport of CrossFit. The only difference is the events that people compete in, you can be more strategic in when you want to take these events and peak. It's not like some marketing company's going to call you up and be like, hey, we need you in 8 weeks to compete here and then 6 weeks to compete here. You're like, no, well, I'll do this one. I'll do Wadapalooza. I'll go try for this one and I'll try for that one. And if you're a bigger name, you might have that more opportunities thrown at you because they want you there to bring in an audience. So the question comes down to, well, how do you strategically set up training to be able to perform well at these events? Right. And I almost think like that changing of verbiage means a lot for people, or maybe just for me. When I think of peaking and say we got to peak for this event, it almost comes with more pressure from an important standpoint because of how much people talk about we got to peak for this. We got to be able to, we're peaking. And you look at what people are doing, and it's like, I don't even think half the people out there know how to peak an athlete or what that even really fucking means. I think there's still random shit thrown at the whiteboard on this person because CrossFit athletes, big sport athletes can sustain and do so much of training, but that doesn't mean it's right, and they should be. And it's almost like you want to look at, well, how can I get this person to be performing their best in this competition, right? Whether you talk about the decrease in volume, the increase of intensity, lining up training protocols to mimic the event, but dropping the volume down and essentially bringing the intensity down with whatever time span you go, whether it's a 7 or 14 or sometimes a 21-day style peak. These things have to be lined up in accordance with the competition. The most important thing that you got to do for these athletes really, to me, is twofold. The first fold is properly building their fitness. And when I say fitness, I'm talking about everything that encompasses the needs of the sport, right? From strength, endurance, power endurance, gymnastic skills, monostructural work, energy system work, dynamic contractile work with inside different energy, like building up their complete level of fitness is a first fold as best you possibly can based on the needs of the sport. And that becomes a very challenging component with the sport of CrossFit because you don't know the needs of the sport. Right? Like we don't fucking know. We know it's literally anything and everything in between. And no matter what competition you're going to, it's gonna be different than the next competition, right? It's not like if you're peaking a 400-meter sprinter and they're doing 2 micro peaks into their main event, well, they're sprinting 400 meters. Like that's what they're doing. Like,
Yeah.
the air quality might be different. The track's gonna be a little bit different, but the distance, the turns, the straightaways, that's all the fucking same. Starting blocks, the way you start, like that's all the same. You go to CrossFit, the entire landscape is different, right? The big discussion now is squatting all the time versus no squatting and this and that. Well, that's what you get in this field with a company that failed to ever define workouts, right? I think that's what makes
Exactly. Yeah.
that's what makes hybrid so exciting. Not hybrid, high rocks so exciting to everybody because, well, here fucking is. No matter where you are, no matter what you're gonna do, here's the same thing you're doing, right? That is the most challenging thing of having athletes being ready to compete in CrossFit because you don't know what's going to happen unless they're able to put out the workouts early enough in advance. But if they do put them out early enough in advance, it's going to be one, maybe a max 2 weeks in advance, which is still the time of when you're essentially starting that deload. So you can give touches. So where am I going with this? What I'm pretty much saying is if you have an athlete and you're trying to get them ready and they're going to be doing different events throughout the year, then you have to try to take that aspect and clump it into like that's their competition training block, ideally, right? No matter how long that might be. It might be normal and that might be longer, well, it will be longer than a normalized competition training block, which might be like 8 to 12 weeks. This might span out a little bit longer. What that means is you have to be strategic with your deloads, your fatigue management, and ensuring these ebbs and flows of the programming of bringing them up with intensity and volume, bringing them back down in accordance with when that competition is going to be. They hit that, so that's going to be a spike. Then it comes back down into a transition deload to recover from the stressors placed on them. Then you might ramp it back up slightly more and then bring it back down for competition. You're planning this sort of peaks and valleys with inside intensity and volume as you get them ready to compete and then bring them back down from that competition and not hammer them too much throughout. And that's what you have to kind of think about is how can I have this athlete ready to perform at their highest level through these events? And if they get injured or banged up and you have another one coming up pretty soon, well, then you have to bail out of that. But ideally, hopefully you're setting up these events where there's enough time in between to allow for recovery and then a ramp back up. So what does that mean? Well, that's really different for a lot of athletes. But to me, you really want to think about minimum like 2 months, 2 to 3 months between minimum. If it's like 4 or 6 weeks in between events, then those are going to be more like what I call dosages, right? You're going to kind of dose them with a competition, dose them with a competition. There's no expectation to do really well. Let's just have fun. Let's just see where you're at. But if you're someone that's like, hey, I gotta do well. I gotta hit these fucking hard. I gotta perform well. Well, then you have to become way more strategic with how much time is in between. And it's almost gonna be, um, I'll call it like a mini macro cycle in between the comps, right? Where it's like, okay, we hit it super hard. We competed. We might have a 1 to 2. We might have like a transition week. We might have like a 1 or 2 week kind of like regroup phase. We might have like a 1 or 2 to 3 week intensification phase. Now we might ramp back up to a 1 or 2 week comp phase, leading into the comp, then bring it back down, regroup, reset in the same format, hit it again, and you might progress that way, right? And there's lots of different ways you can go about it, but I think the biggest thing for people to take away from this 30-minute ramble that I've been doing is ensuring you're getting proper recovery with inside the athlete. You're giving them time to ramp up and come down in between events, and you have them in a position where they're going to be able to compete at a high level, which takes into part sleep, it takes into account nutrition, recovery tactics, and then fatigue management and the day-to-day basis of the training and stress management.
What do you think? So I thought thinking about, we'll call them developmental athletes, intermediate athletes, whatever you want to label them, right? Like you're talking about, these builds and then back offs, builds and then back offs with, strategic time in between. Well, based on how your coach programs for you or the level of the athlete and like the periodization model that they follow, do you think there's benefit in training specific qualities? Like we're like, hey, the focus has been X, Y, and Z. Like we're building strength, we're building like whatever it is, and we focus in on those qualities. The athlete knows these have been the training priorities. Sending an athlete into a competitive scenario with the goal of looking at how those things are developing, and then we compete. We're like, okay, are we tracking? Like, are we looking good from the build we just came off of? And then backing off and going into the next phase of training and kind of building their training year like that and developing expectations around what the training cycle has been. I have done that. I feel like it worked pretty well, but what do you think about that?
I think that's a great idea. I mean, that's just like any other sport, right? If you think about it as a sport, then strength, power, endurance, VO2 max, threshold, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Those essentially are skill sets to perform well in the sport, right? You look at like this, like basketball, dribbling, reactive work, shooting, floaters, change of pace, change of direction, change of body positioning from defense to offense, using your body as a shield, like you can go on and on. Those are skill sets to perform the sport well. Now, in all sports, whether you think about like boxing, basketball, baseball, CrossFit, whatever it might be, you put yourself in a position to develop your skill sets to your capacity to do well. But you have to see how well you can utilize your fitness or your skill sets inside of a competition, right? Hence why sparring is so important. I could jab cross all fucking day long, but if I don't know how to do that with proper angles, or if someone's angling me out with throwing punches at me, then it doesn't matter my skill set. If I can hit a bag or mitts really good, I gotta be able to do that when someone's trying to hit me back. And in the sport of CrossFit, it's very similar, right? Like you can work on your strength and you can have good power and you can enhance skills of your ability to execute different dynamic contractions in various task and time priority workouts and training. But if you have a hard time, but you have to see how you can do once you're being judged, once you're in a different environment, once you have the pressure of competing, once you have the pressure of a game plan not working, being able to understand how to game plan and strategize, how to game plan and strategize when things aren't going well, and having those intra-workout resilience capabilities, how to perform well with multiple competitions in a day. The whole aspect of competing is sort of like putting it all together in the sport. And you have to understand how you're doing that, because I've seen it multiple times where people will just work on the skills and developing their fitness and all these things. But if they don't know how to compete and they don't know how to do well in a competition setting in a different environment, then they're going to be the individuals who look great in training, but can never do well in a competition, right?
Mm.
And people do need to get familiar and comfortable with, as they're developing the skills, if their goal is to compete in CrossFit, they have to get better at the sport of CrossFit, which is essentially doing CrossFit, right? And doing it in a competition environment. So I do think those instances can be very useful for sure. I think what people fall into trouble is when they stay in that realm too long or too hard, right? Or they go through the competition and they don't have realistic expectations, and then they get pissed and they say, well, I gotta do more, I gotta train harder, I gotta do more shit and do this and do that and do this. And you kind of get wrapped up in that world. It's like, well, no, you got to understand, like, we were just using this to see how you've been developing with these certain things, right? And we're going to use the next one to now see how we're developing on the next stage, right? And it can be effective as long as people go into it and come out of it in the proper mindset.
Yeah, one thing I'm really starting to see in people is people just don't take good enough notes after a competition. A transition week, deload, like whatever you want to call it, that's the time to reflect, to sit back and really review the performance. And I don't think athletes do a good enough job at that. Like, what really went well? What was I saying to myself? What were my pre and post exercise, like workout habits? How did I fuel? Was the fueling adequate? All the little nuanced things that may get overlooked because they get in that mindset of I didn't perform the way I thought I would have performed. And then they just get in this negative cycle instead of looking at the competitive experience as a learning opportunity.
Right. So how do you work with athletes on that?
I tend to write it into their program. Whenever, I write whatever the recovery week looks like, I include like a reflection statement and I break it down kind of over the week. I'm like, tell me all about your nutrition. How did our nutrition strategy go? Then we'll dial in and we'll look at mindset, movement, efficiency, gear checks, all of that stuff. And I lay that out and I try to just give them some sort of systematic approach within the program that gets them thinking about the smaller aspects of competing, with the goal of when the next competition comes up, I scroll back through their program and I'm like, here's all the things that we thought went really, really well. Here's all the things that we think potentially we missed the mark on. Let's dial this in and make those incremental changes come this competition.
Yeah.
And that's honestly worked really, really well for me. I like having those kind of chronological touch points, and you can see the growth within it. Whether, they have mindset challenges or they have self-talk challenges or things like that, you can start to see, are we heading in the right direction?
Right.
You know,
Yeah, and I think, to me, I think one of the strongest things when having a good coach and an athlete is a coach's job is to be able to keep sight on the forest through the trees, right? And not get lost in the
mhm.
mundane shit where athletes are going to focus on the daily mundane work, right? And the coaches need to be able to keep the athletes locked in on the daily stuff, but also, have that kind of light shining on them of the destination of where they're trying to go. Because
Yeah,
it can get tricky over time, and it can get lost over
yeah,
time.
that's definitely a huge part of peaking, especially multiple peaks, is outlining what's the big priority item? Like, what do we actually give a shit about? And keeping them focused on that more than anything. Like, I get it. If you're a competitive person and you're going into competing, it's real easy to just want to like send it and put it all out there. But like you said earlier, just going into competitive scenes and being like, hey, we're going to have fun with it. We're going to see how we stand. We're going to see how we bounce back. Maybe practicing different tapering protocols, finding
Mhm.
what works for the athlete, and like objectively gathering some data around these competitive buildups, knowing that this isn't the real goal. Like, this is just competitive playtime,
Right.
realistically, Um, that can be wildly helpful. And from a coaching perspective, you're just that much more potent come actual game day, where you're like, listen, we tried a 21 week or a 21 day taper, and that was too much. Like, maybe we need to cut it down or whatever. Those little nuanced changes are the things that are going to allow you to hit that highest possible level of performance that we're seeking in the peak.
Yeah. Yeah, and I think too, people have to keep in mind with CrossFit athletes is the amount of volume that they're really doing, and have a systematic decrease in how you taper, meaning don't over taper is what I'm talking about. If you have someone that's training 5 hours a day, 6 days a week, which some people do, and I'm not saying that's wrong, but if you have some people who are hitting that much volume and they've been doing it for an extenuated amount of time, then all of a sudden you drop it to like an hour a day 4 days a week. Like that's a huge it's like a 75-80% decrease of total volume,
Mhm.
which might stall them out, So you really have to understand your athlete and know what that proper percentage of a taper should be for them. And I think that's something that people don't talk enough about is over tapering, which I have seen in the past where
Mm.
people completely drop everything, right? And all of a sudden they go into the competition just almost like stale, you know?
Well, I mean, with that, do you realistically think most coaches know the total amount of volume that they're throwing at their athletes,
I don't.
which is probably priority one
Yeah.
or problem number one?
Yeah.
Like,
I
how do
know.
you trim it 40-50% if you don't even know where you're at?
Yeah. I usually start like 30%, and I go from there.
Oh, really?
If it's someone's like a higher training age.
Sure, sure. Well, talk to me a little bit about like the so like tutor, right? And like what this peak is looking like. He's just coming off WFP, right? They had a little hang up with WFP,
Oh,
and now you're
fuck
like, all right, we're
that. That was
no, that was bullshit.
fucking
But
witchcraft.
but now the priorities shift,
Yeah,
right? You're like, all right,
import
now we're building to the next thing. So relatively quick turnaround. Like, one, what did that conversation look like? And two, like, what are you thinking about? We're like, all right, now we're in build back mode, or now we gotta like maintain this a little bit longer than we thought, especially with his elbow.
So he actually handled it really well. Like he took full responsibility of it and was like, well, it's a learning experience. And now I just got to know that I need to hold everything just a little bit longer than what I assume, right? Or ensure I have like multiple judges. So the conversation was a little easier. I was like, hey, dude, I'm sorry this happened to you. Like, you're not the first person this happened to. You won't be the last, but it sucks when it's you, right? Type thing. Now, his taper is tricky because he's a young kid, but he's been training for a long time, right? He was at the games as a teen for a couple years, and he's worked with some other programs that have really fucking smashed him because of how strong he is. So he kind of has this, taste in his mouth of of excessive volume and intensity. But at the same point with him, we need to get proper touches in to prep his elbow because his elbow wasn't ready for potentially what the semifinals could be. So his taper really came down to like a week and a half long is what it's going to be in the program leading into the online semis, because I still need to get proper usage and touches with that elbow for him to build confidence and for us to see like what the limitation is with it, right? So it's a smaller taper, but I've strategically looked to adjust his central nervous system response a little bit, started sooner. So that started about 2.5 weeks. His intensification is being monitored. His volume's coming down about 10-15% from a mixed modal standpoint, but the skill work on his elbow with higher skilled movements hasn't come down yet. So it's kind of like a 3-part taper for him around specific things. Like strength wise, we were able to bring that down because he's strong enough. However, he hasn't hit a heavy snatch in a very long time. So we still need to keep some form of touches in their form without overdoing it. Capacity wise, we've limited a lot of, quote unquote CrossFit style workouts on him because of the demand on the elbows that they place. So we still needed to keep touches in there leading into the semis. So that stuff's still there, but the overall volume of it has dropped, like I said, about 10-15%, while still maintaining controlled, fatigued skill set work. What I say by that is, an EMOM of echo bike cows and legless rope climbs, because the legless rope climb is honestly something that we just started doing this week, and it's been like almost like 2-3 months since he's touched it, right? So that's sort of like where we're at with him, and is a lot of conversations and discussions on how he's going. He's very in tune with his body, and he'll tell us if he's feeling like smacked or beat down. So that makes it easier from a monitor standpoint, right? And then obviously the week of, they start on Thursday. It's just going to be complete kind of like droppage, like the 3 to 4 days up before.
Yeah. I mean, that's good.
And it's like, is that the right way? I'm like, I don't know, because this is like the first tape I've ever done with him. But my point is through conversations with him, feedback, analysis, check-ins, evaluations, is he feeling ready? And is he feeling good and healthy? And does he have confidence? Is he feeling confident in himself? And that's the biggest thing I'm trying to go after for him, is going into it feeling confident. No matter what the workout is, you're going to feel confident. And that's my biggest objective with it.
Well, what do you got? You got anything else? Anything else you want to drop?
I don't know. What are some hot topics that we can talk shit about? Mayhem squatting?
I don't even know why people are upset about this. Or realistically, if anyone is upset about it, or it's just one person that's upset about it.
I think the premise of it contextually is wrong. Meaning, if I'm understanding this correctly, Brian Friend made a comment, and his comment was there was a lot of squatting, and he said people were complaining in other events that there wasn't enough squatting, but no one's complaining about this event being a lot of squatting. So he was just saying, like, is it because it was rich in his event, no one's complaining, whereas they were complaining in the other thing? He was saying it just should be equal. But he also went on to say that it was a great event, he loved it, and thought they did a phenomenal job. And then I think like Hiller took his comments and like changed the way Brian said it to kind of like spark some shit. Who fucking knows? My point is, like, that's the fucking environment. Like, that's exactly what I was talking about with the sport and why it makes it a challenge to taper. And it's by definition the unknown and unknowable. There's no set thing saying, hey, across the competition is, A, B, C, D, and E. It's whatever the fuck you want. There's literally, there's even no, like, it can be every single time domain can be the exact fucking same, right? It's like it is what it is. I've seen games and regionals where 6 out of the 8 events were all upper body pulling workouts, right? And it's like, that's what makes it challenging, but that's also the sport. So everyone's always going to critique something, but I don't think critiquing anything has fucking legs to stand on, because there's no governing body assessing the workouts or the demand of the workouts or how they're put together. It's like, that's why everything's so fucking different all the time. But if you do notice, the people who have the best fitness still perform well at every single event they go to. It doesn't fucking matter what it is. Like, they're still going to perform well. Like, you take the GOATs, you take Rich, Matt, and Tia, guess what? In their fucking prime, they're winning every fucking event, or they're winning every competition. It doesn't matter who programs it and what it is, right? You take the people who are the fittest, and they're still going to rise to the top no matter what it is. You know, where the separation comes into play with the programming is when you start getting into anatomical build and strengths and weaknesses. Heavy squatting, you know, shorter people who are great squatters, great, they're gonna fucking do better. If it's a longer fucking base competition with more running and longer emphasis there, then hey, those people aren't gonna do as good.
Yeah, I think if you just get away from like the extremes, I feel like not even every year, but every once in a while, there's just one extreme from like a volume standpoint where it's one massive event. And if you just did away with those, it's all gonna work out.
Yeah.
You know? Yeah, it's gonna be interesting where the year goes though.
It is.
I like
It is.
I mean, I like Mayhem's. I like what they put together. I think it made a lot of sense for their athletes.
Yeah.
But it's not like anybody else didn't do well.
Yeah,
Like you don't have to be a Mayhem athlete to do well at Mayhem.
yeah.
Program things. I don't think that stands true in any fashion.
Right.
Yeah.
It's just everybody's a Mayhem athlete, so that's why it might seem like it. Right. It's like,
that's also fair.
good for them. Yeah, man.
All right, well, guys, we're not gonna hold you up. That's what we got for the day. That was kind of micro peaking, thinking about taking athletes through multiple peaking cycles throughout the year, kind of thinking about the differences between the intermediate, the advanced, just some not necessarily hardline principles, but placement factors you want to think about as you're working people through the competitive cycle. So hit us up if you have any questions. What do we got coming up? We got the next round of the Conquer Mentorship. We're about to wrap up number 1, which has been phenomenal. So keep an eye out if you're interested, if you're a coach and you want to join that. We're going to start sending out more details there. I know myself, I know you, the rest of the Conquer coaches are all actively taking new athletes. So if you're looking for a change or want to give one-on-one a try, definitely shoot us a DM. Jake's our guy on the socials, so he'll get you sorted. He'll get us hooked up. Definitely talk some shit to him. He's our guy. But he deserves to get a little bit of shit talked to him. So hit us up. We're here to help. I hope you guys enjoyed the show. We'll talk to you guys next week.
Later.